The higher he went, the greater was the effect of bad luck. Anyhow, he didn't think much about it because he had to give all his attention to the cultivation. As the next day dawned, everyone began with their usual routine and headed for the palaces. San accompanied Gu Li to the Crystal Palace. Since it was a first-rank demon palace, it was much taller and bigger than the previous ones he had visited. Shockingly, there weren't any pilgrims other than San and Gu Li on that mountain. They paid the elemental coins and entered the foot of the mountain. San was amazed to see that the entire mountain and the palace on top of it were made out of crystals. Meanwhile, Gu Li was nervous to step onto the stair track. He was anxious about his fight with his replicated opponent, but San counseled him that it would be all right. The opponent, despite having the same skills and abilities, was not a real man, and he couldn't copy his actions in any way. Because he was entirely the same in his abilities as Gu Li, his flaws could be utilized in order to knock him out of the battle. Gu Li's tension was reduced greatly, but he still required a few moments to gather courage and prepare for the encounter. Thus he stayed back, and San went on towards the stairs. As he set his feet onto the first step, he could feel his entire body being scanned in order to replicate an opponent with similar abilities. He quickly concealed his secret abilities and wrapped his body in a thick cloak of blue-silver Emperor's aura. A few seconds later, the scan was completed, and he moved on to the next step. There was a scanner on that step too. It was so powerful that it could penetrate into the deeper spiritual sea which he was hiding. San was pretty sure now that the first two steps were for scanning him inside out, and the third step was to replicate an opponent that he would have to fight. He quickly stepped onto the third step to visualize his opponent. All of a sudden, the environment changed, and everything changed into a crystal world. Out of the blue, a man resembling San emerged right in front of him. As he started attacking San, it was revealed that he could only use the blue-silver Emperor skills. Hence, it was proved that the scanner could not entirely replicate the abilities as San's replica had none of the qualities that were hidden beneath the cloak. To fight with him, San used the blue-silver overload gun. The replicated opponent copied his attack and counteracted it with his blue-silver prison skill. However, he couldn't succeed in counteracting San, so he was knocked down immediately. San had won the fight against him. He had defeated him due to his combat experience from his previous life. The opponent tried his best to copy his moves, but couldn't duplicate his skills and memory, so he lost. As soon as the battle ended, the environment changed again, and everything returned to normal. Gu Li had also stepped onto the stairs to fight his replica. San didn't disturb him and continued with his journey towards the peak. The fourth and the fifth steps were similar to the first and the second steps because San was scanned all over again. On the sixth step, he met an exact replica of him again. His strength was comparable to the replica on the third step. The only difference was that he had learned the blue-silver Spirit Emperor skills. It meant that the opponent wasn't entirely destroyed in the previous battle. Instead, he learned from it and came back stronger. However, it still wasn't an issue for San because he had many other ways to defeat him. He used the spiderweb restraint move to block his attacks. After blocking his attacks, he performed the ghost shadow perplexing trick to defeat him. Once again, he had won the battle, but he expected the same replica to appear 3 steps later again with both abilities engraved in his mind. Nevertheless, he moved forward onto the 7th step. Everything got back to normal again. At that moment, San understood quite well that the basic test of the palace was that the replica would eventually learn all the abilities. In that way, he would have to encounter a stronger and stronger version of himself in subsequent steps, and would have to find newer ways to defeat the replica. It was fine until when he found out that he would have to fight almost 500 battles to reach the peak. He totally freaked out. Did it mean that he would need 500 new moves to tackle his opponent? It was indeed going to be a tough job. As he moved on to the 9th step, the replica appeared again, with the knowledge of both the tricks used in the previous battles. He used both the ghost shadow perplexing technique and spiderweb restraint to escape and restrain San at the same time. However, San was still able to defeat him by using the controlling crane capturing dragon technique. It was one of the most famous techniques of his clan. The 3rd battle had successfully ended. He stepped onto the 10th step, expecting it to be a scanner again, but he was surprised by the results. The 10th step had taken him halfway up the mountain. Within the blink of an eye, he had traversed such a long distance. The sudden miracle falsified his concerns that he would have to win 500 battles to reach the top. He was saved from at least half of them. He wondered what kind of tests might be awaiting him in the second half of his journey. Moving on to the next 2 steps, he expected to be scanned. His prediction was correct. He was thoroughly examined from the inside for the replication of his abilities. Stepping onto the 3rd step from halfway, he geared himself up to fight a replica. However, to his utmost astonishment, there were 3 replicas in front of him. He was bewildered. How could he fight with 3 versions of himself all at once? It was so unfair to place one against 3 opponents. The replicated opponents didn't even grant him a second. They began attacking immediately. San could see 3 blue-silver strike arrays approaching him. There was no way they could be counteracted. He got all fidgety, but then realized that he had a first-class bloodline too. The golden Liger Flame could fight all those opponents at once. He utilized it to burn the blue-silver arrays. All 3 of the replicas were knocked over, and San had won once again. Though he had triumphed in the battle, he was worried about revealing the golden Liger Flame bloodline. However, it wouldn't pose him any danger because he had used it in the Sword Saint Palace too. What worried him even more was the fact that he would have to fight 3 replicas in the next round, and all 3 of them would be able to use the golden Liger Flame. He hesitantly traveled up to the next battling level, 3 steps ahead. As soon as he stepped there, he could see 3 discrete fumes being assembled as his replicas. He took advantage of spotting them early and restrained them with his spiderweb restraint skill. The first attack was aimed at the middle one, and the right and left replicas were attacked later on. Surprisingly, his plan worked. The middle one was killed even before it acquired the shape of a human. The next target was the left one. It was difficult to kill him because he had already assembled himself into a functioning human. San used the blue-silver overload spear as an initial attack toward him. The replica was so strong that it couldn't be defeated merely with a single trick. Without wasting time, he superimposed the first attack with the blue-silver emperor trick. Now, both of the skills together made a pretty strong attack on the replica. Within a split second, he was defeated too. 2 of the 3 highly strong replicas had been killed. He then aimed at the third one. Because there was only 1 replica left, he thought it would be easy to fight him. A strong gleam of the golden Liger Flame was approaching San from the opponent's direction. There was only one option to counteract it. If he used it, he would win the battle within seconds. But it was a very risky option. The only way to defeat him was to hop into the golden Liger Flame and freeze it. That move, though it was quite simple, required a lot of courage. Since it was the only way out, San jumped into the flame without thinking about the consequences. He gathered all his strength and spiritual energy and utilized it to freeze the ever-growing fire. That was it. He had counteracted the golden Liger Flame. He had won once again. All 3 replicas had been killed at once. Getting over that battle, he moved on to the next step. Surprisingly, he was just 3 steps away from the peak. He had almost reached the top. It meant that the last step of the stair track would be his final test. As per the previous records, there were 3 preliminary battles, each with 1 replica. After that, there were 2 intermediate battles with 3 replicas. Since there was only 1 final battle, it would possibly include 9 replicas. That was definitely going to be an onerous test. How on earth could one fight with 9 replicas at once? He wondered if he had any unused moves left to tackle them. Was the Crystal Palace crazy? Perhaps they didn't want anyone to reach the top. He didn't hop onto the final step immediately. He waited for a while and meditated to regain his lost strength. He required abundant strength because all the 9 replicas would have the golden Liger Flame. There was no way he could counteract them without revealing all his secret powers. If he revealed them, he would definitely be targeted by the Crystal Palace. He had several bloodline abilities, and his spiritual power reached the peak of 9th rank. The Crystal Demon Emperor wouldn't allow him to exist if he ever found out about his abilities. It was really dangerous for him to travel up to the last step. The safest option in that case was to retreat down the mountain. Nothing in the whole world was difficult, as long as one was willing to give it up. He had made up his mind that he wouldn't go to the top. As he turned back to go down the mountain, he was staggered to know that his feet were stuck. He couldn't move. Something was pulling him up. Was the Crystal Palace a force to be reckoned with? The power pulling him back was so strong that he couldn't bear it. Suddenly, he heard a strange voice telling him to go up to the top of the mountain now that he had already reached there. Someone was trying to persuade him to change his mind and continue going up. The voice said that if he had not been through the last step, then how could he assume it to be that dangerous? Only cowards would do as such, and cowards were not meant to become powerhouses. The counseling voice turned into a dictatorship all of a sudden. The unknown man ordered him to step ahead and fight the battle. It was a do-or-die situation. There was no chance for a do-over. His speech ended with him saying that these were the rules of his Crystal Palace, and that no pilgrim could rebel against them. It was the Great Demon Emperor. He was observing San. It seemed as if he was in great trouble. The force pulling him up became stronger and stronger. Eventually, it was able to drag him up to the last step. The environment turned crystalline again. The test was about to begin. Everything was going just as he had expected. 9 replicas appeared in front of him. They were slowly approaching him like waves approaching the shore. The first thing San could think of was the Zhuge crossbow to repress the replicas. Otherwise, they would besiege him instantly. However, the damage from the crossbow was minimal because the replicas burned the Liger Flame directly from their body instead of the bloodlines. The regression, though not so damaging, wasn't a complete failure. All the 9 replicas were injured to some extent. The injury didn't last long and they regained their strength. Now, all the replicas had surrounded him entirely. There was no way out. It was imperative for him to make use of his hidden powers in order to save his life. He was short of time to make a well-thought decision because 2 of the replicas had self-exploded with the golden ligger flame, and the explosion had injured him badly. If they continued exploding, he would be killed within no time. Now 7 replicas were standing around him. The golden ligger flame that they radiated turned into a magnificent aura collectively. San was confused to witness such a unique ability. He had never seen it before. Indeed, it was the omnipotent Crystal Demon Emperor's skill. It was more thorough than his understanding of the golden ligger flame. All of a sudden, San's fear intensified as he saw a virtual image of a huge liger in front of him. The replicas were trying to mess up with him, but San had a counteracting skill to teach them a lesson. Since they used illusions, he made use of his special teleportation skills to escape the encircled zone in which he was trapped. As he teleported himself outside the circle, he backfired onto the replicas with the blue-silver overload spear and the 1,000 accusing fingers. The attack was successful, and 2 more of them were killed. Now there were a total of 5 replicas to fight. Just at that moment, the battle took a strange turn. The Great Demon Emperor had been watching the battle since its beginning. He was quite impressed with San's skills and combat abilities. He had not seen such a talented human ever before. Owing to his special scanning abilities, he had discerned that San had a total of 4 bloodlines, 2 of which were first-class ones. Since he was quite fluent in killing his replicas, the Demon Emperor himself entered the combat ground to fight with San. He told San that his companion, who was still down the mountain on the initial steps, had skills similar to him but couldn't use them as efficiently. Because San's abilities were way more polished than his companion's, the Emperor wanted to test him further. He had seized his companion to add some spice to the exam. He gave San 2 options. The first one was to admit defeat and leave the mountain, but his companion Gu Li would be killed. The other one was to persevere and stand the demon's attack for 1 minute straight. In that way, his companion would be released. San was fed up with the fight and didn't want to indulge further in it. But when he came to know that his friend's life was endangered, he went with the second option. However, he had some conditions too. He asked the Emperor to release his friend even if he lost the battle against him. On the other hand, if he won the battle, he requested not to be enslaved to join the Crystal Palace. He wanted to live freely until he found his true direction. If enslavement was necessary, then he preferred dying without fighting. The Demon Emperor was quite stirred by his audacity. He promised to fulfill all his conditions. After deciding upon everything, both of them stood up in front of each other as opponents. The Emperor assured San that he wouldn't use power beyond his cultivation levels. However, he threatened to be merciless if San used any shortcuts. San deemed it necessary to bring forth his secret cards and talents to win the final battle. Without revealing his true powers, it was highly unlikely for him to defeat the Emperor. The countdown began, and the first attack was from the Emperor. He used the blue-silver overload spear in addition to 1,000 accusing fingers. San was bewildered to see the spiny spickles approaching him at an accelerated pace. The swift speed of the attack wasn't all. He had used a space-shattering peacock transformation too, by virtue of which San's surroundings were shattered and foggy. He couldn't move to carry out his defensive move. The Great Demon Emperor was indeed worthy of being the #1. He had put forward an excellent show as per his abilities, but San's counteraction was yet to come. He was all geared up to unfold the spectacular skills he had learned in his past life. The first and foremost requirement at that time was to stop the swift spicules. He used his special time delay spell to freeze them for a while. The Emperor was in total shock to see his blue-silver overload spear all sucked in. He had never come across such a trick before. Now that San was saved from the spears and spicules, he counteracted with a golden-winged rock transformation by utilizing his 5th bloodline power. As he slowly revealed his powers, the Great Demon Emperor was gaining more and more interest in the fight. Since he was much more experienced than San, he blocked his 5th bloodline power with his immortal Phoenix bloodline. It suppressed San's bloodline to a great extent. At that moment, San realized that the fight demanded more of him. He revealed his purple demon eyes to cast a negative aura on the Emperor. As expected, the demon got a little dazed by the intense power, giving San a few seconds to make his final move. That final move could either cost him his life or could gain him victory. He was standing at a stake with death at one end and victory at the other. There was nothing in between. He had decided to use the Heavenly Fox transformation, relying upon the luck of the spirit. That was the best he could do in those circumstances. He attacked the Great Demon Emperor with all his strength and waited for the outcome. He was somewhat positive about his victory because he had used his best power. Still, the results were highly surprising for him. The Emperor was immune to the attack. Someone couldn't stand firm against the purple demon's eyes. What worried San more was the fact that the Emperor had learned the purple demon eye trick from him and was using it against him. He was totally freaked out to see himself being controlled. He would die as soon as the demon gained entire control of him. Suddenly, a brilliant idea popped into his mind. He remembered that he yet had an even stronger power to utilize. The burning blood power could save him from the ferocious attack by the Demon Emperor. He gave himself another chance and risked his life to attack the opponent once again. That was definitely going to be his final chance. A few seconds later, he noticed his surroundings turning into an ocean. He was completely surrounded by water. The opponent had used another clever trick against him. He blocked San's burning blood power by the endless heavenly spirit emperor. He thought he would be able to knock him down with the ocean move, but he was unaware of the fact that San was an ocean lord in his pre-incarnated life. He had a pretty good experience dealing with the powers of the majestic sea. The emperor had unknowingly executed a move in favor of San. Perhaps it was a result of the heavenly fox's luck he had absorbed the previous day.